Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
All right, and a good Monday to you. Going to be a little lazy, I guess, in some respects, because the first half of the show is going to be Colin Jost's monologue at the White House Correspondents' Dinner over the weekend. It is fantastic. And then I'm going to give you an excerpt on the second half here of Joe Biden's interview with Howard Stern, a couple of key points, key moments that I wanted to share with you on that. But because we are low on time and Colin Jost went about 23 minutes and I get about 21 in the first half, let's get right to that. Colin Jost at the White House Correspondents' Dinner Saturday night.
Thank you, everyone. Hello. That was hard-hitting journalism you saw in The Owl. I didn't know you were going to show photos of me from high school.
I have some surprises.
Yeah, it's not really fair. You can't do it for President Biden because the technology wasn't invented when he was in high school. It's not really fair. Good evening, everyone. I'm Colin Jost, and I'll be delivering the Republican response. I'll be honest with you, I don't have a lot of time. I need to get back to New York because I'm juror number 5 on a big trial. Trump's lawyer took one look at me, and he's like, he's got to be on our side. Thank you, Kelly, for that very kind introduction. Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Vice President Harris, Doug. Doug, as you can tell from all the comments about my wife, I'm also used to being the second gentleman. And I am honored to be here hosting what is, according to swing state polls, the final White House Correspondents' Dinner. I hope that tonight will be a night to remember for most of us.
Stop.
I was excited to be up here on stage with President Biden tonight, mostly to see if I could figure out where Obama was pulling the strings from. I have to admit, it's not easy following President Biden. I mean, it's not always easy following what he's saying, like... But before I begin tonight, can we just acknowledge how refreshing it is to see a president of the United States at an event that doesn't begin with a bailiff saying, "All rise." And I would like to point out, it's after 10 p.m. Sleepy Joe is still awake.
Yeah.
While Donald Trump has spent the past week falling asleep in court every morning. Though Fox News said he was just being anti-woke. We are all here tonight at Nerd Prom. Well, Matt Gaetz is at regular prom, but... I actually thought I saw Matt Gaetz here tonight, but it was actually just my own reflection in a spoon. Like many of you here tonight, I pretend to do news on TV. My Weekend Update co-anchor, Michael Che, was going to join me here tonight, but in solidarity with President Biden, I decided to lose all my black support.
Oh my God.
Che told me to say that, and I'm just realizing I was set up. I've done Weekend Update for a while now, but most people don't know that I started out doing the actual news. My first job out of college was as a reporter for the Staten Island Advance newspaper. They do not have a table here tonight. But they asked me to pass along this message to the other print journalists in the room. You think you're better than me? By the way, I want to point out, when I worked at the Staten Island Advance, we had a daily circulation of 100,000. The Washington Post would kill for that. The Correspondents Association provides scholarships to promising young journalism students who may one day be sent off to cover dangerous geopolitical hotspots like Columbia University. Tonight, this event is being televised live on C-SPAN. Woo! And if you're at home watching C-SPAN on a Saturday night, I hope they find your body soon. Before your cats get to it.
Oh, come on.
There are so many incredible news organizations here tonight, also a few credible ones. The Washington Post is here, Washington Post. They were the ones taking your coats at the door. Please be sure to tip.
Not much laughter there.
Fox News is here tonight. It's the end of an era. Rupert Murdoch stepped down at Fox News, which is strange. I didn't think there was a step down from Fox News. Trump Media is here. Trump Media, not at a table, just screaming loudly in the corner to no one. Wordle is here tonight. Sorry, I meant the New York Times. I forgot they do stuff in addition to puzzles. I have to say, it's not a great sign when the only thing keeping a print media company alive are games people play on their phones. Too chilling for you guys? This room just froze faster than Mitch McConnell. And I have to say, apologies to the Times, but as a Staten Islander, I still get all my news from the New York Post. Thank you. The only paper where the front page always has the same 200-point font, whether the headline is World War III to start tomorrow or Central Park Owl dead in building collision. The New York Post is like having the New York Times summarized for you by a crackhead. The Times will say, a border deal continues to evade Congress, and the Post is like, these Mexicans are taking my stuff. There are so many incredible individuals here tonight. Laura Trump is here tonight. Okay, I got one woo. She recently released a cover of the song I Won't Back Down. Upon hearing it, Tom Petty died again. I can't believe I'm saying this to a member of the Trump family, but maybe stick to politics? Senator Bernie Sanders is here because he's not the type to pass up a free hot meal. And in general, there are so many hardworking, influential senators and congresspeople here tonight. And I just want to say, on behalf of everyone I know, stop emailing us. Stop it. We get it. Democracy is on the line. And your plan to save it is to flood our inboxes like your Crate and Barrel. It's also wonderful to be back in Washington. I love being in Washington. The last time I was in D.C., I left my cocaine at the White House. Luckily, the president was able to put it to good use for his State of the Union. I'm kidding, of course. The president doesn't call it cocaine. He calls it high-speed rail.
That is good.
By the way, can you blame the guy for turning to cocaine? He must be exhausted, orchestrating 4 separate trials against his rival,
right?
Rigging the Super Bowl,
right?
And gearing up to steal a second election. Wow.
Biden chuckles.
Biden laughed.
Exactly.
I love, by the way, that Trump's 2 attacks on President Biden are that he's a senile old man and a criminal mastermind.
You're right.
I'm like, I think you gotta pick one. Personally, I don't know any criminal masterminds who bike to get ice cream. Also, it's not like Trump himself is young and sharp. I'm not saying both candidates are old, but you know Jimmy Carter is out there thinking, I could maybe win this thing.
He'd be incredible.
He's only 99. There is an election. There's an election 6 extremely long months from now. So let me see if I can summarize where this race stands at this moment. The Republican candidate for president owes $500 million in fines for bank fraud and is currently spending his days farting himself awake during a porn star hush money trial, and the race is tied?
Exactly. More of Colin Jost's performance at the White House Correspondents' Dinner when the Ron Show returns on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, or wherever you podcast. Thank you for listening to The Ron Show. Follow us at Ron Show ATL on your preferred social media platforms, RonShowATL.com, to listen to entire past episodes. It does seem a little disconnecting, obviously, that the White House Correspondents' Dinner continues to take place in such alarming times. But in all honesty, sometimes we just need to pause and catch a few laughs wherever we can in such dire moments. Colin Jost gave us plenty of those opportunities. Let's get back to his monologue at the White House Correspondents' Dinner.
The race is tied. Nothing makes sense anymore. The candidate, who is a famous New York City playboy, took abortion rights away, and the guy who's trying to give you your abortion rights back is an 80-year-old Catholic. How does that make sense? By the way, President Biden, isn't it crazy that he's only our 2nd Catholic president? And what's even crazier is that in just a few short months, we'll have our 3rd in RFK Jr. I'm kidding. Like his vaccine card says, he doesn't have a shot.
That's good.
Everything feels strange now. By a lot of measures, President Biden is having a very successful first term, but people don't seem to realize it. Like with the economy, the vibes are bad, but the numbers say it's strong. The economy is kind of like you on the steps of Air Force One. It feels like it's stumbling, but there is somehow upward progress. I do think that you can do more on the economy, sir. I really do. For example, have you considered eliminating the national debt by shorting Trump stock? People keep asking if our lives are better than they were 4 years ago. Of course they are. 4 years ago, we didn't have online sports gambling. What more do you need? By the way, that's probably what's keeping the economy afloat. Online gambling and Taylor Swift. Without those, we'd be in a recession right now. The problem is people are always going to compare your first term to Obama's. But I think there are actually a lot of positive similarities. You both made big strides in healthcare. Obama got us out of a recession. You got us out of a pandemic. Obama got bin Laden. You got OJ. And by the way, now that OJ's dead, who is the new frontrunner for Trump's VP? Is it Diddy? By the way, I bet if Trump did select Diddy as his running mate, I bet this race would still be tied. I think even some Democrats say that they are underwhelmed, but I think they're just not living in reality. Manage your expectations, people. It's like tonight. Sure, we all wish we were at the Waldorf right now, but we're at the Washington Hilton. And we have to make the best of it. Just be happy you're not at the airport Hilton. Journalists, these are challenging times, and we need the people in this room to help guide us through it. Your jobs are not easy, and it doesn't help that we're living at the end of traditional media. The gatekeepers are gone. Did you know that 90% of people now get their news exclusively from social media? And that must be true because I saw it in a random guy's TikTok. He was recording the video while driving a Toyota Corolla, but he seemed to know his stuff. Isn't it crazy, by the way, that TikTok could be outlawed in the US by the end of this year? That's a real shame, because we're going to need TikTok to document who is storming the Capitol next January 6th. Things are not bad for everyone, though. This may be the worst time in history to be a print journalist. It is the best time in history to be a courtroom sketch artist. My God, the most famous man on earth is on trial, and there's no cameras allowed. Just the artists, their pastels, and their desire to make Trump look as bad as possible. Every sketch of Trump looks like the Grinch had sex with the Lorax.
Listen to the laughter.
In closing, I would really like to take a moment to recognize all the print journalists in this room. Your words speak truth to power. Your words bring light to the darkness. And most importantly, your words train the AI programs that will soon replace you. And finally, I wanted to thank my family, and I wanted to thank my friends for being here tonight to support me. I want to thank my wife for enduring lots of jokes and for agreeing to individually meet everyone in this room right after the ceremony. That's really special, honey. Thank you. Don't be shy. Come right up. She hates privacy. And with my family in mind, I wanted to share one last thing with you before I go, and I wanted to share one thing with you, Mr. President, before I go. I lost my grandfather this year, as you alluded to, a firefighter, William Kelly. He's the reason that our son's middle name is William. He helped raise me growing up, and I would not be here today without him. My grandpa was a firefighter on Staten Island for 40 years. To make extra money for his family, he was a substitute teacher, and he painted houses. And since it's Staten Island, I should point out it's not like the Scorsese Irishman painting houses. He was not a mafia hitman. He actually painted houses. The FBI is here. I don't want to start a whole thing.
All right, so unfortunately, we're up against a hard break here on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com. And as you listen via podcast, if that's how you do it, then you'll just have a seamless little break here. But we do have to come back. I want to let Colin give us the rest of his tribute to his Staten Island firefighting grandfather.
This is The Ron Show on America One Radio.
Thank you, and welcome back. So, again, as I noted at the start of the last segment, it is a little disconnecting that folks are putting on tuxedos and gowns and going to a White House Correspondents' Dinner. Colin Jost joking, which may be the last one as an American democracy. But I get it. It is a little disconnecting. There are traditions, however, that folks decide to carry on. And there's, of course, scholarships attached to that dinner. But also just a moment for us from time to time, even in the most serious and dire of circumstances, to just stop and catch our breath and enjoy a laugh, sometimes at our own expense, as President Biden was sure to find out. And but there were also some touching moments as well. Here is Colin Jost wrapping his monologue and alluding to decency. He spoke of his grandfather, a Staten Island firefighter, and compares his grandfather to President Biden. I want you to hear how Colin ties the two together.
My grandfather was another rare Irishman who didn't drink because he lost his father and his brother to alcoholism. And I swear, Mr. President, this is not an age comparison. You remind me of him. Some of your best qualities remind me of his. And I will say he was 95 and he was still great at stairs. I think it's because he didn't try to run up them.
Oh, there you go.
But the reason that I bring up my grandfather, and I don't know if you realize, Mr. President, but Staten Island firefighters are not normally your demographic. Staten Island voted about 70% for Trump in the last election, and the other 30% was for Giuliani. But Staten Island also sided with the British during the Revolutionary War. So we're not always on the right side of history. You remember. But my grandfather, a Staten Island firefighter, voted for you, Mr. President. He voted for you in the last election that he ever voted in. I mean, I'm sure someone else will vote twice in this election using his name, but that's just how the Democratic machine works. He voted for you, and the reason that he voted for you is because you're a decent man. My grandpa voted for decency, and decency is why we're all here tonight. Decency is how we're able to be here tonight. Decency is how we're able to make jokes about each other and one of us doesn't go to prison after. We go to the Newsmax after party. And when you look at the levels of freedom throughout history and even around the world today, this is the exception. This freedom is incredibly rare, and the journalists in this room help protect that freedom, and we cannot ever take that for granted. So, Mr. President, I thank you for your decency on behalf of my grandfather, and I thank all of you, almost all of you, for your decency as well. I am very honored and grateful that you invited me here tonight. Thank you and good night.
Good stuff there from Colin Jost, Saturday Night Live's Weekend Update co-anchor. All right, so President Biden also appeared on a episode of the Howard Stern Show. Howard releasing that on Friday. And speaking of decency, I want you to hear, this just gave me goosebumps. And I know this sounds like an entire podcast episode, a pro-Biden podcast episode. I get that. I have to sometimes talk myself into rallying myself as a troop for the cause, knowing the magnitude, the landscape that we're looking at of this election cycle and all that's on the line. And understand that I'm a Bernie guy. You know, I come from the progressive wing, and I understand why there are pro-Palestinian protests happening on college campuses. And I grimace to see law enforcement and state and even local officials weighing in and using the heavy hand of law enforcement, sometimes that cannot control itself, it would seem, Georgia State Patrol, in moments like that. And I understand the pushback on the Biden-Harris administration from those who want to see a ceasefire. But I also understand that behind the scenes, the Biden-Harris administration is working on that ceasefire. It just can't. How do you tell the college student that the aid that has already gone to Israel can't just be withdrawn, that the new aid going to Israel isn't going to be seen by Israel for like a year or two, has no bearing on what they're doing right now, and also that we can't just insist on a ceasefire because how do we back that up? Do we send in our own troops? Nobody wants that, right? Because that's just an escalation of conflict. Anyway, that's a larger conversation for another segment. Maybe I'll do it one day. I just wanted to follow up, Colin Joe, speaking of human decency in elected office, and he spoke of his grandfather choosing that, despite being a Staten Island firefighter. He just mentioned that demographic is overwhelmingly Republican, as is Staten Island. Nonetheless, Howard Stern and President Biden spoke about Beau, President Biden's son, who passed away from brain cancer years before he decided to run for president. I want you to hear this exchange because this just touches on the decency that the current president offers the American people in the Oval Office.
Here you were a U.S. Senator, and you know the song by Creedence Clearwater, I'm Not a Fortunate Son. Your son, he's a son of a senator, joins the military and was in Iraq.
Well, look, my son Beau should be sitting here instead of me. He's more capable than I am. And he was the Attorney General of the state of Delaware. And one day I came home. He came over to the house. He was living in Delaware. And he said, Dad, what are you doing on Friday? I said, what do you need? He said, I need you to pin my bars on me. I said, pin your bars on you? What the hell are you talking about? He said, I joined the National Guard. And facetiously said, somebody's got to do this anyway.
Were you in shock that he joined the National Guard?
No, I wasn't in shock. It didn't surprise me. It just, he had to give up the Attorney General's job because you either have to work for the president or for the state.
So he was Attorney General at that point.
He was Attorney General, turned it back over to a Republican who had been there before.
Wow.
And went for a year. The problem was he lived next to one of those burn pits. He came back with a Bronze Star. He came back with a service medal, but he also came back with stage 4 glioblastoma. The brain injuries out of Iraq are extreme, like they were the people in 9/11, all those firefighters, because of the toxic fumes.
You're convinced that the reason he got brain cancer is?
I know it. It's been determined, yeah, and a lot of them did. A lot of them.
Did he call you and say, Dad, I've gotten a horrible diagnosis?
He had to come home. And it just kept getting worse, and that's when he realized they did the analysis. And then he was in Walter Reed for a long time, and but I wrote a book called Promise Me, Dad. He knew his time was up, and one night we're having a dinner at our home before he was incapacitated, hospitalized, and he said, "Dad, can we talk?" And I said, "Sure." And he said, "Look at me, Dad. Promise me, Dad. Promise me, Dad, that you'll not leave public life. I know when I go, you'll want to quit. You'll want to quit." And he looked at me and said, "Dad, give me your word as a Biden. Give me your word."
Wow.
Look at me. I give my word on the health of my family. And he said, "Promise me, Dad, he won't step back." And I made the promise. And before he passed away, the last thing he said before he passed away, literally we were in the hospital bed, Hunt and I with him, lying in bed with him. He looked at me and said, "I'm not scared, Dad. It's okay. I'm not scared. It's okay." He was gone within... Anyway.
The choice and decency that we have can be sort of summarized in that segment of President Joe Biden on Howard Stern, in this segment from when Donald Trump was on the Howard Stern show years ago.
You could also say, as the owner of the pageant, it's your obligation to do that.
So you have done that. Now,
I'll tell you the funniest is that I'll go backstage before a show.
Yes.
And everyone's getting dressed and ready and everything else. And, no men are anywhere. And I'm allowed to go in because I'm the owner of the pageant, and therefore I'm inspecting it. I'm inspecting.
Right,
I want to make sure that
You're like
everything is good.
You're there.
Yeah, the dress. Is everyone okay? They're standing there with no... Is everybody okay? And you see these incredible-looking women.
And by women, he meant in large part teenage girls at a pageant. There are more excerpts from the Howard Stern show that Howard Stern released via social media. He and President Biden talking about the abortion issue and January 6th, and where are the decent Republicans, your father's Republican Party, to stand up to the Orange Man?
Obama had his time to appoint a Supreme Court justice. He was going to appoint Garland. These maniacs in the Senate said, "No way, not interested." And now we've got a Supreme Court that's nuts.
Well, it's a really extremely conservative court, maybe the most conservative court in modern history. And when they struck down Roe v. Wade, saying that it was not federal constitutionally guaranteed, it was a state issue. States could make those judgments. And one of the justices, Clarence Thomas, said, it's not that women don't have a choice. They can, in fact, change it if they, in effect, at a state level, but we'll see if they have any power. Well, they ain't seen nothing yet. You're going to see what will happen. If I'm elected president again in the second term, we're going to be able to make Roe v. Wade the law of the land again, because they're based on every state in the union being able to judge and get a majority vote.
You think that
I think
can be
we
done?
can do that, because I think there's going to be a real lesson learned on the mega Republican side of the aisle, because we're going to see a whole hell of a lot of state referenda, and they're going to want to restore it, and that's going to be able to be done.
Can I tell you a fantasy I had?
Sure.
I don't know if you're going to debate your opponent.
I am somewhere. I don't know when. Yeah. I'm happy to debate him.
This is how I would handle it. Tell me if I'm nuts. Well, I am nuts, but tell me if this is accurate. I would stand there on stage with Trump, and I would repeat over and over again, "Excuse me, please find me 11,000 votes so that I can win the election." I would just repeat that over and over again. And then I'd say to the audience, what are we debating? A man picked up the phone and wanted to say, "Fake the election, give me 11,000 votes." I don't know how any American who loves this country, that's the end of the debate. You don't get to run if you're going to fix an election.
On January 6th, when they were storming the Capitol.
And a police officer died.
Yeah, and he would say nothing. He was sitting in that office that dining area off the Oval Office for 3 hours and said nothing. I was supposed to make a speech on the economy that day. Instead, I made a speech I was in Delaware on that issue, because I was elected president, but I wasn't sworn in yet. It was derelict. It was almost criminal. He did nothing. He just sat there and watched what was happening. Not a single, and now he wants to he calls them patriots and victims, and says he's going to pardon them all if he's reelected.
How do some of the guys that you served in the Senate with, I'm talking about Republicans, how are they going along with this?
Well, I don't think, look, this is not your father's Republican Party.
No, it isn't.
This is, I had a lot of Republicans, including the old segregationists that I served with, who at least you could talk to, at least on matters relating to they were totally wrong on civil rights. But the fact is that they understood there's a need for a consensus to run this country. And I gave my word I'd never say their names, and I never will. In the last 3 years, I've had 7 sitting Republican senators. Well, 2 are gone now. 7 sitting Republican senators call me to tell me, Joe, I agree with you, but I just can't do it. He'll get me.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you get these calls in secret where guys go, listen, I can't say it publicly, but I'm for you and I'm going to vote for you. I'm a Republican, but screw it. I can't vote for this guy because he's talking about ending the democracy.
Well, they're not saying they're going to vote for me. They're saying, I agree with you.
And do you say to them, you coward? Why don't you say something publicly? Where's Jeb Bush? Where's George Bush? Where are these guys? Why don't they say, hey, I'm interested in saving the democracy for our grandchildren?
Well, I don't think the election's over yet on that score.
What do you think's going to happen? I can't imagine you're going to lose, but...
Well, look, he's promised if he doesn't win, there's going to be a bloodbath.
Can you
things
imagine?
Like that. Here's what bothers me most. We have a fundamentally different value set. For example, when he was in Paris, he wouldn't go to that gravesite and said they're losers, these men and women who were killed in battle defending America. Losers, and I'm glad I wasn't there because I think I would have, my son's in one of those graves, in one of the graves back here, not there. And the idea that they're losers and suckers.
And McCain's a loser. He said McCain's a loser.
Well, McCain's a loser.
Can you imagine?
When John McCain got out of prison and was released, he came work for me. He was on the Senate liaison officer. We traveled over 100,000 miles together. And he was like an assistant because he worked for
It's a fabulous man. I got to meet him before he died.
No, he was a straight up guy, man. And
yeah.
Tough as hell. And, but I find I can't fathom a president of the United States of America saying that the folks who died defending this country were suckers and losers.
All right, so I'll give you as many clips of that as I can on today's show notes, which you can get each weekday when we do a show at ronshowatl.com. Back after this, The Ron Show on the American One Radio app, AmericanOneRadio.com, or wherever you podcast. We're in the final leg of today's Ron Show, and I thank you for listening. Get all of it if you are only catching some of it when we broadcast this. 9 to 10 a.m. or 5 to 6 p.m. on the American One Radio app or AmericanOneRadio.com. You can hear it in its entirety on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com. Also, wherever you podcast when you follow The Ron Show, or when I share it at RonShowATL.com with show notes. So most of today's show has been all about the presidential race. And you know what? Early voting for the primary in Georgia began today. So I want to remind you about that in case you decide you want to go and vote. Vice President Kamala Harris is in town today to begin her economic swing state tour. So traffic's going to be a nightmare. Just going to go ahead and warn Atlantans of that. But I want to get back to some of the weekend audio. Former Attorney General Bill Barr, remember him from The Christmas Story? You'll shoot your eye out. He looks strikingly like that kid would have grown up to look, right? Anyway, he was on CNN over the weekend with Caitlin Collins. And I want to play 2 audio clips that I think sort of sum up why we're so worried about Republican decency and where it is, why it's gone. When will this party stand up to the demons within its ranks, the demon currently at the top of its ranks? Listen to this exchange.
I hear from a lot of Republicans who defend Trump saying, well, that's a hypothetical and that's ridiculous. But Alyssa Farah Griffin, who was Trump's communications director, posted yesterday and said that you were present at a moment when Trump suggested executing the person who leaked information that he went to the White House bunker when those George Floyd protests were happening outside the White House. Do you remember that?
I remember him being very mad about that. I actually don't remember him saying executing, but I wouldn't dispute it. I mean, it doesn't sound. The president would lose his temper and say things like that. I doubt he would have actually carried it out. I don't.
But he would say that on other occasions. You said
the president. The president had I think people sometimes took him too literally, and he would say things like similar to that in occasions to blow off steam. But I wouldn't take him literally every time he did it.
Why not?
Because at the end of the day, it wouldn't be carried out, and you could talk sense.
But just because it's not carried out and you could talk sense into him, doesn't that still mean that the threat is there?
A point Caitlin Collins makes that Bill Barr decides to shrug off because there were, I guess, enough people around him to keep Trump from doing something stupid in his irate tone. It wasn't about Donald Trump and his ability to discern on his own at that point in time. Let's also remember, by the way, Donald Trump ran right through, just literally trailblazed right through all of the very fine people that he was appointing to his cabinet and surrounding himself by in his administration. And you have to wonder if almost all of his former cabinet is on the record of saying they're not voting for that guy. Well, who's he going to choose next? If he's run through all of the barrier type Bill Barr types who were going to impede him from doing irrational things, then what's the second term going to see Donald Trump surrounding himself by? Bill Barr, however, still going to vote for the guy. Listen to Caitlin Collins when they discuss Bill Barr's apparent loyalty to the party and its nominee.
Last time you and I spoke, when we had you on the show, you told me that you would jump off the bridge when it came to it on who you were going to support in the 2024 election. It appears that you have jumped off that bridge because you said recently you were going to vote for the Republican ticket come November, which means you're going to vote for Donald Trump.
I said that's what I plan to do at this stage.
You're saying you could change your mind, maybe?
Well, I'm not going to vote for Biden, this is a wild time. Who knows what's going to happen in 7 months? But I expect, as between Trump and Biden, there's no question in my mind.
Oh, so you're kind of suggesting that maybe Donald Trump may not be the Republican nominee?
Or Biden may not be the Democrat.
So you would vote for another Democrat if a different Democrat was on the ticket?
It's hard to imagine that this party, the Progressive Democratic Party, would nominate someone I would support.
Yeah, I know you disagree with him, but I have to ask you about something that Trump posted about you this week because he responded in response to you saying you'd vote for the Republican ticket. Wow, former AG Bill Barr, who let a lot of great people down by not investigating voter fraud in our country, has just endorsed me for president despite the fact that I called him weak, slow-moving, lethargic, gutless, and lazy. Based on the fact that I greatly appreciate his wholehearted endorsement, I am removing the word lethargic from my statement. Thank you, Bill.
What a toddler.
Yeah. It's classic Trump.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
What's the question?
What's your response?
Well, obviously, what I said was that I'm very disappointed that this country is stuck with this choice between two people who I don't think either of them should be president of the United States. But given that binary choice, I feel I have to choose Trump.
But he's mocking you.
So it's not about me. I think that I've said this all along. If faced with a choice between two people, neither of which I think should be president, I feel it's my duty to pick the person who I think would do the least damage to the country. And I think Trump would do less damage than Biden. And I think all this stuff about a threat to democracy, I think the real threat to democracy is the progressive movement and the Biden administration.
Are you hearing this, man? The man who left his office in late December because he was tired of Trump's 2020 big lie election conspiracy claims. The guy who, like us all, witnessed as the vice president's life hung in the balance on January 6th. But he's going to vote for Trump because Trump's going to do less damage. Hello, body bags and freezer trucks behind hospitals. Just saying. Back tomorrow, 9 to 10 a.m. on the American One Radio app, AmericanOneRadio.com. Show notes at RonShowATL.com. Have a good one.